you sit down at your desk to work on an important project, but a notification on your phone interrupts your morning. Later, as you're about to get back to work, a colleague taps you on the shoulder to chat. At home, screens get in the way of quality time with your family, and another day goes by, and once again, your most important personal and professional goals are put on hold. What would be possible if you followed through on your best intentions? What could you accomplish if you could stay focused and overcome distraction? What if you had the power to become indistractable? Well, today we have Nir Eyal, the behavioural design expert from Stanford and the author of the best-selling books on distraction and attention. He made waves with his first book, called Hooked, which is all about how to build attention-grabbing products. And then his follow-up, Indistractable, is how to claim sovereignty of your time and attention and build a life on your terms. And the conversation is really brilliant on how to just start owning your time and be responsible for what you want to do and get it done, and then do whatever the hell you like with the rest of your time. And there's not much more else for me to say than that Nir Eyal is great. It was an honor to have him on the podcast, and I hope that you enjoy the episode.
We talked about great powers and great responsibility. If there was one superpower I would want, it's just the power to follow through. I mean, imagine how amazing our lives would be if we simply did what we said we were going to do. Because the problem today is not that we don't know what to do. We all basically know what to do, right? Maybe in generations past, you could say, oh, how do you lose weight? I don't know. Does anybody not know that you have to eat right and exercise? We know that. Does anybody think that to have good relationships, we don't have to be fully present with people? Of course we do. Does anybody not know that to be better at your job, you have to do the work, especially the hard stuff that other people don't want to do? We know this. What we don't know is why we don't do the things we know we should. So the real problem is not that we don't know how to do things. I mean, if you don't know it, Google it. It's all out there. What we don't know how to do is to stop getting in our own way. And that's the problem of distraction, is why do we act against our better interests? And in fact, this is not a problem that originated with Facebook and the iPhone. Plato, the philosopher, talked about this 2,500 years ago. He called it akrasia in the Greek, which means to do things against our better judgment. It's not a new problem. It is part of the human condition to act against our better judgment, to get distracted. So I think the most important lesson that people can take away is a fundamental understanding of what is distraction, because it's such a mortal enemy of becoming the kind of people we want to become. So it's really important to understand what it is. And the best way to understand what it is, it's one of these terms that everybody thinks they know what it is, but at least personally, I didn't really understand it, because if you ask people, what is the opposite of distraction, right? What's the opposite of distraction? People will say it's focus, but that's not true. The opposite of distraction is not focus. If you look at the origin of the word, the opposite of distraction is traction. That both traction and distraction come from the same Latin root, trahare, which means to pull, and they both end in the same 6 letters, A-C-T-I-O-N, that spells action. So traction, by definition, is any action that pulls you towards what you say you're going to do, things that you do with intent, things that move you towards your values and help you become the kind of person you want to become. Now, the opposite of traction is distraction. Distraction is any action that pulls you further away from what you plan to do, further away from things that you do with intent, further away from your values and becoming the kind of person you want to become. It's very important, because I would argue any action can be traction or distraction. Let me give an example. When I would sit at my desk every day at work and say, okay, I'm going to get started on that big project. I'm not going to get distracted. Here I go. Nothing's going to get in my way. I'm not going to procrastinate. But first, you know what? I should just check email real quick. Let me do that thing on my to-do list that I've been putting off. You know, that the things that feel like I'm being productive, right? Email, I got to do that at some point. I got to do some things on my to-do list. And I would trick myself, right? How many of us have done this? That the thing we say we're going to do, we justify not doing it by saying, oh, I got to do all this other stuff too. Well, let me just get to that first, right? The thing on my to-do list, the email, that's work related. I'm being productive, aren't I? No, because you have allowed distraction to trick you into prioritizing the urgent and the easy tasks at the expense of the important work. And so anything can be a distraction, even if it's work related. Now, just as anything can become a distraction, anything can be traction. So I do not subscribe to this ridiculous chicken little narrative that, oh, social media and technology is melting our brains and it's addicting everyone and it's hijacking our minds. Rubbish, silly. There is nothing wrong with playing video games. There's nothing wrong with scrolling social media. Somebody tell me why watching the boob tube, watching the football match on TV mindlessly is somehow morally superior to scrolling on a social media account. I can't tell the difference. What is the difference? There's no difference. Anything you do with intent, anything that is done according to your values and your schedule is great. Enjoy, play video games, watch a movie, go on social media. I'm not going to tell you not to, but do it on your schedule and according to your values. So you can turn distraction into traction by making time for it, by simply deciding in advance. The difference between traction and distraction is one word: forethought. So the time you plan to waste is not wasted time. So I'm not one of these people who say, oh, go on a digital detox, digital minimalism. No, do whatever is according to your values. Whatever it is you want to do with your time in your life, I'm going to help you do. That's the essence of becoming indistractable.
That was amazing. It's just great to see how passionate you are about this. And, like some people like write books and things that just think they can sell something, but you just like living and breathing this, and you're just so, yeah, just to see that energy coming out of you, like how much you just want to like help people's lives.
I
Yeah.
live it every day. I'm 42 years old. And as I mentioned, I used to be clinically obese. This is the best shape I've been in my life. I have a 6-pack at 42 for the first time ever. And
Nice.
I'm just telling you this because my life has changed in every conceivable way. I have a better relationship with my daughter, with my wife. I'm more productive at work. It's incredible. Like, this is the macro skill that affects everything else you want to do with your life. This ability to simply follow through. And it turns
Mm.
out that it's not about doing the right stuff. It actually doesn't really matter what you do. It's about whether you do it.
Yeah.
Because if you do it, you can learn from it. What most people do is they say, oh, someday I'm going to do this. Someday I'm going to do that. They have this million item list of to-dos. They don't actually do it. So it's just one distraction to the next to the next. If you can fight that, then you really can self-actualize. You really can be the kind of person you want to be and live the kind of life you deserve.
I did like this 10-day meditation Vipassana retreat. And I remember being on it, just thinking like how absurd it is that like anyone can literally write out what they should have eaten for the last 3 years to be healthy right now, kind of thing. And like everyone knows exactly what they're doing. And you're like, well, why can't I just sort of like in the moment actually choose to do the thing that I know I should be doing? Like what happens to my stupid consciousness that it can't actually control itself? And yeah, ever since then, I have been a lot more purposeful with my habits and like a little bit sort of distance from like my experiencing self, I guess, which I thought was really useful. I guess you didn't talk about meditation too much, but did you find that was like a really useful thing? Or also I wanted to ask was, what was like the thing that suddenly hit you with like, okay, I have to stop this? Was there something like a specific moment where you're like, okay, I'm just going to start like on this project of like hacking myself to be indistractable? Or was it like a slow, oh, I decided to start losing a bit of weight. I found that this thing helped me and maybe it could help me with other things. So just like the story behind how that happened would be nice.
It was really a seminal moment. So after I wrote Hooked, a few months after it was published, I was with my daughter one afternoon. We had a beautiful day planned together and just, some quality daddy daughter time. And I remember we had this book of activities. One of the activities was, make an origami crane, and another was a Sudoku puzzle. And one of the activities was to ask each other this question of, if you could have any superpower, what superpower would you want? And I remember that question verbatim, but when my daughter answered, I can't tell you what she said, because in that moment, for whatever reason, I thought it was a good time to check my phone, and I started getting distracted with God knows what. And by the time I looked up from my device, my daughter was gone. She left the room to play with some toy outside, and I realized I blew this perfect daddy-daughter moment. And so that's when I kind of had to reassess my own relationship with distraction, that I knew that's not what I wanted to do. I didn't want to send her this message that whatever was on my phone was more important than she was. And yet somehow I got distracted. I did something that I did not plan to do, and she suffered the consequence. And so that's when I decided I had to understand this deeper psychology. And so I did what I think a lot of people do. I went on a digital detox. I got rid of the phone. I got myself a flip phone from Alibaba for $12 that doesn't have any apps. It only sends text messages and receives phone calls. And I thought, okay, great. No more apps, no more social media. That's it. That'll solve my problems. And then I got rid of my laptop too. And I got a word processor from the 1990s with no internet connection because I really wanted to, okay, that's it.
Yeah.
The technology is the problem. I'm going to get rid of the technology. And I still got distracted. because I would sit at my desk and I'd say, okay, now I'm going to really work. I'm going to focus. I'm going to concentrate. I'm not going to procrastinate. But there's that book on the bookshelf that I've been meaning to look into. I need to do some research on that book. Or, boy, my desk is really not tidy. Let me just clean it up real quick. Or, oh, the trash, the trash really needs to be taken out. And I would keep getting distracted, because distraction isn't just about the thing that distracts you. It's about what's going on inside of you. And that was, I think, a big revelation to me, was it's not just about the external triggers. The external triggers are the pings, the dings, the rings, the things in our outside environment that can lead us towards traction or distraction. Turns out that it's about only 10% of the reason why we get distracted. 10% of the time you're distracted because of some kind of external cue, an external trigger. 90% of the time, it's not the external trigger. It's the internal triggers. What are internal triggers? Internal triggers are uncomfortable emotional states that we seek to escape from. Boredom, loneliness, fatigue, uncertainty, stress, anxiety. These uncomfortable sensations that we look for escape from. How do we escape them? We turn on the TV, we check our phone, we take a drink, we do all kinds of things to get out of our heads, to get out of these uncomfortable emotional states. So therefore, if we don't tackle this first, this is the first step to becoming indistractable, is realizing that time management requires pain management. Time management requires pain management. If you don't have tools in your toolkit to deal with that emotional discomfort, you will always get distracted by one thing or another, because we are looking for escape. Procrastination and distraction, not a character flaw. There's nothing wrong with you. You don't have some kind of diagnosis. There's nothing wrong with you. It's simply that we don't have the learned tactics to deal with that emotional discomfort in a healthy way that leads us to traction rather than distraction. So that's step number one, is mastering the internal triggers. Step number two is to make time for traction. The vast majority of people out there have no idea what they got distracted from, right? If I asked you, okay, what did you get distracted from today? What was on your schedule? Most people don't keep a schedule. Well, you cannot complain that you got distracted from stuff if you didn't know what you got distracted from. You must plan your day, including the fun stuff. If you want time for video games, do it, enjoy it, go on social media. But again, make that time on your schedule. And I show you exactly how to do that, how to synchronize with your boss, how to synchronize with your spouse. I show you exactly how to do that as well. The third step is to hack back those external triggers. And so I show you how we can hack back, how we are not defenseless, how we are not hopeless. We can remove all of those external triggers that don't serve us, whether it's on email, meetings, Slack notifications, the news, our kids. All of these things can be sources of distraction, of the external triggers, and we can hack back every single one. And then finally, the last step is to prevent distraction with pacts. Pacts are when we make we use what's called a pre-commitment device. This research is decades old. And I'll show you exactly how to make these commitments so that when distraction rears its ugly head, you have a last line of defense. You have a firewall so that worst case scenario, you are prevented from getting distracted. So to answer your question, what's the secret formula? It's that there is no one magic bullet. You have to use all four techniques in concert. Master the internal triggers, make time for traction, hack back external triggers, and prevent distraction with pacts. If you use these four techniques in concert, you can't fail.
Thanks so much. Yeah, just to be annoying, I'll go back to the meditation side of things because
Oh yeah,
that was a
meditation. You asked
brilliant.
about that. Sorry.
But I'll add something first, because when I did the 10-day retreat, so when I normally try to do meditation like 10, 20 minutes, like it wasn't so much pain, it was more just being aware how useless I was at meditating. When I did the
Mm,
retreat, the whole try and sit still for 2 hours, and like, it's the most painful thing of my life. But you learn
yeah.
that like pain leaves, and you can kind of just like identify that there is a pain and not let it overcome you. Like I've smashed my femur, which was apparently more painful than childbirth, but like the pain that I had with Vipassana was worse, I swear. But like you just
Wow.
sit there without moving, being like, it's fine, it will go, my leg won't fall off, it'll be okay. I'll just like move on with my life after this thing and sort of try and like hold your thoughts just on the breath and stuff. And it kind of gets you to really identify that like you don't need to react to pains, whether it's like an emotional or like a physical one. And so whenever those
Yeah.
things come up in your life, whether like it's like an emotion of anger or something, like I need to go to the fridge to get something to eat, it's like, okay, yes, you get to sit and you get like that sort of the window of like consciousness of like, okay, see, what is this pain for? Do I need to sort of let it power me, or can I sort of make my choice first? That's where I guess it really helped me, is like giving me a bit more of that power,
Yeah.
as you said, around dealing with emotional discomfort.
No,
So
no doubt about it. I mean, there is a beautiful revelation that I think you found for yourself in that feeling bad is not necessarily bad. This is my big beef with the self-help industry is that we're constantly fed this diet of aspiring to be happy all the time. How
mm,
can that be a bad thing? Don't we all want to be happy? Well, we have to face the fact that we are not evolved to be happy. Happiness is meant through natural selection to be a fleeting sensation. Our default human condition is dissatisfaction. And that's a good thing because dissatisfaction and discomfort is what drives us forward. Think about it from an evolutionary standpoint. If there was ever a tribe of Homo sapiens who sat around and said, "Oh, everything's perfect. I'm so happy. Everything's contented."
mm,
Our ancestors killed
yeah,
and ate them. Like that would not have been a good evolutionary trait. You want a species to always strive for more. And that it is that disquietude that makes us make life-saving medicine and go to the moon and overturn despots. That dissatisfaction can actually be a very healthy and helpful sensation as long as we use it, we harness it like rocket fuel towards traction rather than trying to escape it or numb it with distraction. So that's a very, very important revelation that I had over the past few years is that feeling bad is not bad. It's about what you do with that sensation and knowing that you can overcome it, that it's not going to destroy you, that feeling a little bit bored from time to time is fine, that feeling a little bit hungry is okay, that feeling anxious or lonely or stressed it's human. It's all right. And I think that's what Vipassana shows folks is, it's very similar to what psychedelics have been shown to show folks a new mindset, a new potential reality. Now, I think there's a lot of good that can be done with meditation. I will give one note of hesitation, and I don't talk about meditation in the book at all, not because it doesn't work, but because I feel like it's been covered to death. I feel like so many people have written about it in much more eloquent ways than I could. So, read their books. Here's what I'll say. Number one, it doesn't work for everyone. Many people get really stressed out with meditation. It does not work for everyone. That's been shown that for many people, it actually backfires. It just doesn't work for them. That's point number one. If it doesn't work for you, you're probably looking for alternatives. Even if it does work for you, and you alluded to this a little bit, that the kind of meditation that most people do, sit with your eyes closed for 10 minutes and bring mindful awareness to your breath, it has been shown to be very effective at making you a better meditator. It does not necessarily translate to other areas of your life. And you alluded to this
yeah,
as much. It's kind of like those brain training apps. A few years ago, there were these craze of apps that can make you smarter. Well, they got sued and they lost in court because they didn't make you smarter. They made you better at taking these quizzes on the brain training apps. And in some ways, that's what we find with meditation. It does make you a better meditator and it does open your mind to realize that, you can breathe through discomfort. You can bring mindfulness to that experience, but we can't meditate all of our problems away. There is a time and a place to use different tools for different jobs. And meditation is wonderful for certain jobs, but it's
mm,
not the end all be all. And so what I wanted to offer were other tools for folks when it comes to this problem of distraction. Absolutely. The first step is to master the internal triggers. And there are certainly techniques that we can use from mindfulness. I talk about techniques from cognitive behavioral therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy that we can absolutely use in our day-to-day lives. But there's a lot more that we can do as well. And so I wanted to share those techniques and those strategies.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. On the subject of distraction, it's useful to step back and consider how much time you spend on yourself and how much time you spend on other people. It's easy to be swept up in what everyone else needs from you without taking the time to think about who do you want to be, how do you want to show up. Therapy can give you the time and tools to find balance in your life so you can also support others without leaving yourself behind. As someone with ADHD myself, therapy with BetterHelp has been a godsend for me to work on my own behaviors when I very easily get swept up with just everything else all the time. And having the time to step back each week to ground myself and reflect with someone else on what I need to do to move the needle forwards has been so rewarding. It's honestly helped my life in so many ways. So if you're considering therapy, I would honestly recommend BetterHelp. and consider giving it a try because it's entirely online and designed to be convenient and flexible to suit your schedule and needs. You can fill in a simple questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can swap therapist at any time with no charge or question. Find some balance with BetterHelp by visiting betterhelp.com/growth mindset to get 10% off today. That's betterhelp, HELP.com/growth mindset. I'll also go on the train of like the problems of meditation. It can almost be like a detachment from like reality and escapism of where you actually sort of like avoid all your problems and be like, oh, it's fine. I'm just going to go to my own internal world and then like ignore everything.
It's so true. And look, if you intended to get your work done or to be with your kids or to do whatever it is you plan to do and you just can't take it, you got to go meditate. Guess what? The meditation was the distraction. Or if you're not acting with intent and that becomes your escape. And let me tell you, if you spend much time in the self-help community, you will meet these people who are pathologically addicted to otherwise healthy behavior, right? We all know that person who runs compulsively. They're not running to something, they're running from something. We know the person who is a workaholic, right? We admire people who work hard. You can overdo that. If it crowds out other areas of your life that are important to you, you can become a workaholic. And the same goes for self-help and meditation. And this is, again, one of my beefs with the self-help industry. There are people who will compulsively read self-help, jumping from one guru to the next, and not actually implement anything they say, because that becomes a distraction from having to actually do the painful hard work of changing your life.
Yeah, violent agreement there. So it's pretty hilarious. And yeah, there's some people that you're like, but you haven't changed your life at all. You just sort of keep on reading and jump on to the next thing and the next thing. And you're like, it's quite bad. Yeah, I interviewed, have you heard of Mike Winnett? I think you'd really like him. He's classed himself as the UK's #1 demotivational coach. And he talks about like entrepreneurs and quantrepreneurs, and he's sort of hating on like Gary Vee and Tony Robbins and sort of, and just pointing out like the amount of money that people waste listening to these gurus who are never actually going to change their lives, and sort of come across like a bit harsh, being like, okay, most people are just too stupid and too dumb to actually ever do something incredible, and they should just stop wasting their money. But also he does have some really good advice around like how he actually did build his business, and he just comes from like slightly sarcastic, funny character that he's invented. He's a bit like Borat or something. It's not actually a real person. It's like a character that he's made up to kind of just like point a finger at these guys. But he's starting to get a good following, and random shout out there. But yeah, it's really annoying how you can kind of just get distracted by like reading more self-help things, and like I annoy myself by the amount of new books that I read and not like going back to the books that I read that was really good and probably life-changing if I spent a bit more time like making better notes and sort of actually tracking like each thing that was in it that was really useful. And suddenly it's delightful to be able to run a podcast or actually get to talk to the authors, and that suddenly brings home things a lot more clearly when you actually get the person to tell you directly. But you didn't talk a lot about using other people in your books around as like an environment cue to make you do things. As in, do you feel like you've utilized others as well to make sure you stick to habits?
Yeah, so there is the fourth step is about making pacts and preventing distraction with these pre-commitment devices. And so we can actually use these pacts with other people. I talk about 3 types of pacts. We have price pacts, effort pacts, and identity pacts. And this can be very, very powerful to kind of enlist other people, that having other people. So for example, an effort pact is when there's some bit of work, some effort involved with getting distracted. So for example, in my household, a few years ago, while I was writing this book and still struggling with distraction, I hadn't figured out all the 4 pieces that eventually went into the book. I found that night after night, my wife and I were going to bed later and later. So we weren't getting enough sleep. Our sex life suffered. We've been married for almost 20 years now. And what we did, I came across this technique of using what I call an effort pact. And what we did, we went to the hardware store and we bought a $5 outlet timer. And whatever you plug into this outlet timer will turn on or off at whatever time you set. So in my household, every night at 10 p.m., our internet router shuts off. And so what I've done is made an effort pact, because if I wanted to turn it on, I could. Of course, I could, go under my desk, I could unplug it, replug it in, but that requires work. That requires effort, right? My wife's also going to see me turning it back on. And so that's kind of this social bond of, wait, what are you doing here? And so it allows for this moment of mindfulness of, wait a minute, is this really what I need to be doing right now? Is this actually what I intend to do? Or do I need to start, getting ready for bed and spending some time with my wife and actually, getting enough sleep and rest? Because we all know how important that is. And so that would be an example of an effort pact. A price pact is when you have some kind of monetary disincentive for getting distracted. And that's also something you can use the help of others. And then finally, an identity pact. And this is the most powerful of the three types of pacts. An identity pact looks at the research around religion and the psychology of identity, that we know that when someone has a moniker that they use to describe themselves, it can relieve them from having to spend a lot of willpower and self-control because it's part of who they are. So for example, a vegetarian doesn't wake up in the morning and say, should I have a bacon sandwich for breakfast? It's not who they are. They are vegetarians. Vegetarians don't eat meat. A devout Muslim doesn't say, oh, I wonder if I should have a beer or not. No, a devout Muslim doesn't drink alcohol. An Orthodox Jew doesn't say, oh, should I have a ham sandwich? They know they don't eat pork. They keep kosher. It is who they are. And that's why the book is called Indistractable. This is your moniker. Whether you read the book or not, you've learned enough here to start calling yourself indistractable. You are the kind of person who strives to do what they say they're going to do. And the good news is we've been here before, okay, with a much more addictive and dangerous substance, cigarettes. So I grew up in the 1980s. And I remember in my household, this is going to sound crazy. If you were born after like 1985, this is going to sound completely nuts. But believe
Okay.
me, I remember that in my household growing up, we had ashtrays in our living room. My parents didn't smoke, but everybody had ashtrays in their home. Everybody had ashtrays. Why? Because back then in the mid 80s, you could walk into anybody's home and just expect to be able to light up a cigarette in their living room. And nobody would question this. They would bring you an ashtray. Feel free to smoke. Can you imagine if someone came to your house and lit up a cigarette in your living room? No way, right? You would kick them out. Well, what changed? Was there a law that says you can't smoke in someone's private residence? No, there's never been such a law. What changed was we inoculated ourselves with what we call social antibodies. We built up this resistance that certain behaviors are not acceptable. So when my mom threw away the ashtrays in our house, and when someone came over and just lit up in our living room, she turned to them and said, oh, I'm so sorry. We are non-smokers. If you'd like to smoke, if you'd kindly go outside, but that's not who we are. We are non-smokers. That's exactly what we have to do with becoming indistractable. I'm sorry, I don't answer every text message in 30 seconds. I don't answer every email in 2 minutes. I'm not constantly on social media. And you know what? If you have lunch or dinner with me and you're using your device, not acceptable. You're going to have to go somewhere else if you want to use your phone, if you want to have a meal with me. Why? Because I am indistractable. It is who I am. And why is that any different than someone who wears unusual religious garb or has an unusual diet? We make accommodations for them, don't we? And we should do the exact same for this new identity of becoming indistractable.
I love that. That's a great sort of philosophy, as in, yeah, it really relates into like your whole mission of and where you get so passionate. And I definitely would love to see a world in 10 years' time where it's just completely wrong to like do things. And certainly, some people are being more mindful around not having their phone at the dinner table and these kind of things. There's so much of an
Yeah,
urge in culture around like, okay, getting back to your email straight away and all these things.
totally.
You know,
And it used to be like that with cigarettes too. I mean, you would
yeah,
smoke anywhere you want, whenever you want. And then people started saying, wait a minute, this isn't so healthy. Like, this isn't so good for us. And so we started taking steps. And that's a much more addictive substance than cell phones. This is just a behavior. We can change it, right? And I tell you exactly how to do that. What do you do if a friend's using their cell phone across the table while you're having lunch? How do you call them out without losing your friendship? There's a right way and a wrong way to do that. And so what I want to do is to help people take a stand and to make sure that we can start spreading these social antibodies so that we can still use these devices, but use them in a way that serves us as opposed to us serving them.
yeah, 100%. That's amazing. I love that idea. I'm definitely going to try and make more content around that. I was also thinking about, okay, it's a general ideology of like, okay, maybe you could start trying to apply that to like vegetarianism and stuff. And like, there's a whole movement around trying to make more people do those things. And your example of like, I've been toying between like vegan to just like, maybe I'll eat chicken sometimes kind of thing. And it's really hard when you're at like the level where you're not classed as something, because like you can't really stick to the thing. Whereas if you sort of
Yeah,
define yourself as vegetarian or define yourself as indistractable, you can like really identify with the things a lot more and sort of be like, okay, yeah, I definitely just can't do this. So I really
right.
like that
Right.
identity pact. And I didn't mean to sort of say the wrong thing when I said like you didn't talk too much about working with other people around things, but I guess I was meaning more around like the general conversation before you make pacts and just sort of seeing what other people are doing and like I guess then what we went on to around like just having the whole social behavior around it as well. It's certainly quite interesting. And how did do you like talk to people a lot around how to like just make this a conversation with others?
Yeah. So half the book is about things you can do yourself. So that's where the 4 parts that we talked about earlier around mastering internal triggers, making time for attraction, hacking back external triggers, and preventing distraction with pacts. Those 4 steps, that's what you can do right now. You don't have to wait for anybody. You don't have to wait for the government to pass any laws. You don't have to wait for the social media companies to do anything. You can do this today. The other half of the book is about different social contexts that we know that behavior is greatly affected by what other people do around you. So the second half of the book is about how do we raise indistractable kids? How do we have an indistractable
Yes.
workplace? And
Mm.
how do we have indistractable relationships? So the second half of the book is exactly about that. It's about these interactions with other people who may or may not be indistractable themselves. The best thing you can do, especially if you're a parent, is, kids are born with these hypocrisy detection devices. They all come equipped with these little antenna that are looking for when we are hypocrites as parents. And so, I see this all the time. Parents saying, "Oh, my kid's always on video games. My kid's always on Facebook." And meanwhile, they're checking email constantly, right? We have
Mm.
to set that example ourselves and show our children, our coworkers, our colleagues what it means to be indistractable. That's certainly the first step. But there's a lot that we can do after we've done that to help others and help ourselves through in these social contexts.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. I did an interview with Nicholas Wheeler, who's the founder of Charles Tyrwhitt shirts, and he was on his phone like the whole time during the interview. But like at one point, he was also sort of complaining about like social media and like phones and like his kids being on phones the whole time. And he's constantly telling them to get off their bloody phones. But then he's like, "But I'm on my bloody phone the whole time," and they're doing email and doing important stuff. And it is really hard, especially we always have like, okay, for our own reason, there's something reason because you're on your own screen where there's something important for you, and you're like, well, this is a reason that I should be doing it. But then like you look at others and you sort of judge them, and you kind of don't have the self awareness for your own things. It's really annoying.
I think it's hard when we don't know what to do.
Mm.
Still kind of a new field. Wait a minute, but how do I do this exactly? Right? There hasn't been a guidebook for actually telling you what to do. And so that's what I wanted to write because, digital detoxes don't work. It's like a fad diet, right? You can't just stop eating. You can't just stop eating certain things, so like no fat, no carbs, like that stuff never works. It's temporary.
Yeah.
You need is a long-term solution. And so what I wanted to give people was, okay, here are the steps. 1, 2, 3, 4. Anyone can do this. Anyone can do it if you try. The only people who can't do it, again, back to mindset, are the people who don't believe they can do it.
100%. Not to like have an argument, or I would say that certainly if I fast for a few days and don't eat, like I do find it does make you aware of the fact that like, you don't need to be like following up on your hunger pangs like at every sort of given hour just because you're probably bored. And it does make you aware of where the pains are coming from and that maybe they're not what you think they are. Not having a device around something for like as a detox does maybe make you a bit more aware, but usually you just go back to all your old habits unless you sort of have created something. But what I wanted to ask about was, let's say in 10 years time, we've created an indistractable religion and like the world is sort of just on point and doing their things. What would you do? What would you do next? What would be your next mission?
Oh, I'm sure I'll find something else. I always write my books to solve my own problems. Research is me search. And so
Mm.
I've got plenty of other things to think about and things that I want to do to improve my own life and to improve the world. So, my timeline is about every 5 years. I write a book, but it comes to me after, years of blogging. So I blog at nirandfar.com. I blog nirandfar.com where I publish articles at least twice a month about whatever I'm working on. And then what tends to happen is that these topics congeal into a subject matter, and then that becomes my next book typically. So I'm sure there'll be lots of things for me to write about in the future, but for now, that's kind of my day to day
Yeah.
is researching, writing.
Okay. Not to distract you from the current thing. Classic problem. So true to being on Indistractable. Nice work. Well, thank you so much for the time and for being on the podcast and sharing all your amazing wisdom and helping me, myself, and all of the listeners on being a bit more indistractable.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for having me. It was a real pleasure and an honor. And yeah, I appreciate it. Stay strong and stay indistractable.
Thank you. You too.
All right. Take
Ciao.
care. Bye bye.